So please welcome the co-founder and president of 30 Tigers, Nashville's own, David Macias.
Hey everybody, I'm a product of the Florida public school system, so I can't figure slides out. So, sorry if any of you are fellow native Floridians. I kid. So, as far as my background goes, I grew up in Lakeland, Florida, and I grew up a total music head. I derived probably an unhealthy amount of my self-esteem from knowing all the members of Black Sabbath when I was 11, and that was social capital then, and so I just sort of was on a roll with that, and at 15 I started working in record stores. I worked in record retail for 6 years, and then I was lucky enough to be hired by Arista Records, where I spent the majority of about a 15-year major label career, and about that time they invited me to find other employment, and so so I did, and I started this company in the aftermath of doing the major label thing, and I didn't necessarily have a vision for what this company was going to be or what it could be, but there was a certain value proposition that remains intact today. And basically, when I was starting the company, I looked at the financial end of things, and so I was like, well, there's all these startups. I mean, it was right at the time when people were really, they were shedding employees, they were shedding artists, executives were finding their way, out. And so there were a lot of people doing startups, and I just thought, well, it's probably unviable to expect anybody to pay me $50,000 a year. Maybe I could find 10 people to pay me $5,000 a year, and then I can bring the sense of process and the skills that I had in terms of helping create a demand around records, and then explain that demand creation to the supply chain. And so what our current business model is now is very much in that spirit. Most of our clients, we do work with some small labels that are more A&R fronts, but the majority of our artists are people like Jason Isbell and Lucinda Williams and Patty Griffin and people like that who own their own. We give them the ability to own their own masters. We don't even license them. I mean, we sign them to straight distribution deals, and essentially the breakdown of the deal is, they make around 75% of the gross revenues for their recordings. We make about 10. Our distributor, Sony Red, who's awesome, they make about 15. We've been with them for 14 years now. So, but we're very careful when it comes to our risk exposure. So we don't, we're very picky about the projects we take on, not only in that we feel like we can be good stewards for the artist's work, but also that the financial model will work. An artist, mentioned Jason Isbell. I mean, he's done very well. His last record did about 150,000 units. Well, the gross value of 150,000 units is about $1.2 million, and so you can do the quick math and realize that an artist, if they own their own work, assuming once again you don't sort of get there if we don't understand how to take your music to market and how to handle the narrative around the work that you're doing. So that's important too, but it can be a really financially remunerative relationship. And so, and we also, because the artists, there's two words that we use around 30 Tigers all the time: love and service. And I know that makes me sound like a hippie, and I probably look like one, but love people enough that even, be loving to people. And if artists aren't well served by, our contracts are ridiculously loose. People can more or less come and go as they want, and it's a little bit tighter than that, but not much more. And then the idea of service. I read a lot about other companies. Our margin structure is largely, and I'll say that it's probably only our margin structure was largely formed around Sam Walton's ideas we're very much kind of a lowest price every day type of operation. And we also look at companies like 3M and Apple in their intensive product orientation. Well, what is our product? Our product is artistic expression. So if we don't understand what's being expressed and understand that between the creator and the consumer, that the idea of consuming this artistic expression has to travel through specific mediums. So it may be journalists writing about it, it may be radio stations playing it, it may be touring, it may be social media. It's actually all of the above. Organizing that conversation, but organizing it around an authentic, an understanding of what the artist is about, and being able to frame it. I sort of have this loose model of authenticity in my head where it's like, who is this artist? Who is this human being? What have they experienced? And how does the artistic expression that they are engaging in, how is it that flows? It almost seems like an inevitability that they're saying what it is that they're saying. I mean, we really specialize more in artists than sort of more commercial radio-driven thing. And not, and as they were talking about with Kenny Chesney earlier, Gavin, I mean, I talk about Kenny Chesney all the time. Yeah, there's absolutely brand identity. Brand does not necessarily mean, but the things that we understand how to talk about are probably more in the NPR kind of Americana vein. What's the future looking like? I hope this doesn't come off too shitty or, I don't know, esoteric or whatever, but I mean, I do feel like, Marshall McLuhan was a technologist, and he was famous for saying the medium is the message. And I feel like we're in this era where technology is booming, and it's almost hard to keep up with how to navigate the sense of identity within this, social networking thing. And I feel like the social media landscape, or even the media landscape even more broadly than that, lends itself to a certain, and I'm not using this word in a critical way, but in more of the sort of classical, psychological way, a certain amount of narcissism. We're thinking about our personal brands. We sort of affirm the self with selfies. We, there's a certain sort of sense about how we're being viewed from the outside. And I think, though, that leads to eventually a certain amount of emptiness. I think as human beings, we are really driven to community. We're really, and I don't mean this in a religious sense, but we're driven to spirit. We're driven for love. And, when the relationships and the sense of self is sort of fast and shallow and quick moving, that at a certain point that doesn't satisfy anymore. And so I feel like that is a reaction to the media landscape and the social media landscape, that artists like, Jason, Isbell, like Sturgill Simpson. I mean, Sturgill's music, if you listen to what he's singing about, who we were lucky enough to work with on his last record, he sings about letting go of the ego. He is all about pathways to spirituality, perhaps or maybe not with the use of hallucinogenic drugs, but regardless, there's a spirit. I think what has drawn people into Sturgill's music is a search for spirit, and so I think more and more you're going to see a reaction to the, once again, not being critical, but the sort of narcissism that I think the present media world sort of drives us to. And so we will hopefully be able to help, artists, and we're certainly looking for artists that lend themselves to deeper conversation. And so, and I think we do it pretty well. So at any rate, I've got 28 seconds left. I don't know if somebody has a quick question. That's essentially what I came to say. So.
one question for David.
I was about to say for 20 seconds.